Happy Friday, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. I hope this Friday finds you all doing really well. I am Linda, and this is, who is this?
Carl.
It's
Hello.
Carl. He's never showing himself anymore. And we are Colourwerx Designs, coming to you from the beautiful Colourwerx Design House. And today is...
Yay!
Yay! So good morning, everybody. It's so nice to have you all popping in here. I see everybody popping in. Good morning, Lena. You said you finally made a live event. Yes, yay! And you know, Lena is on fire in the Colourwerx Quilt Along Facebook group. I must say, all of you guys are. We're doing the All Stacked Up Quilt Along. We've been doing it for 2 weeks. And if you don't know about the Colourwerx Quilt Along group, go over there on Facebook, join the group. It's welcome. Everybody is welcome. But we are doing All Stacked Up, and everybody's All Stacked Ups are looking beautiful these days. So it is great to have everybody here. It is, of course, Friday, January 29th. Can you believe this? January 29th. Let us know if we're streaming okay, if everything's coming over to you okay. We did have some internet gremlins here. We had rain in the desert last night. So in our beautiful desert oasis here. So that sometimes mixes things up just slightly. So we did have some little hiccups this morning, you know, so because of rain, and we didn't have that much rain. I think we had, what, 1/10 of an inch or something. It didn't rain enough rain just to make everything messy this morning. Anyway, let us know if everything's going okay with you guys. Make sure that you like and share this video. We want you to share this with everybody, and also sign up for our Colourwerx YouTube channel, where you'll be alerted or pinged of different videos and tutorials coming at you. Let's, is anything going on with the cactus cam? Shall we check the cactus cam? Look at that day. It's beautiful. And if the clouds would go away in the background there, you would see snow on the mountains. It is absolutely gorgeous. We get a lot of snow in our mountains surrounding us. So you have this beautiful bright sun, and then in the distance you can see all the white snow hanging on Big Bear and Idlewild and all these other fabulous, beautiful little places. I just saw Suzanne checking in from France. Hello, Suzanne.
We're going to go through.
Are you going to go through? Hi, Pat. How are you doing? From Pinehurst. That's great to have you here. And Kay is checking in, of course, from Palm Desert. So Kay is one of our neighbors here. And Letitia, what's going on?
North Carolina, it's cold again.
In North Carolina, cold. Yeah, I remember those winters in North Carolina. They do get chilly. We've been chilly here.
Susan's in Sunny Vista today.
Hey, Suzanne, how are you? Thank you for joining us, everybody.
Texas is checking in.
And hello, Kay from Big Texas. Okay, let's talk about last week's winner. So, you know, we give a $10 Colourwerx gift card every week. We always give out a $10 Colourwerx gift card. So last week's tutorial was quarter square triangles. You know, we're doing our building block basics kind of series here, kind of reviewing some easy blocks to do that you can add into your quilting, and some different ways of doing these blocks. And we've gone through half square triangles. We did quarter square triangles. Today is square and a square, which is going to be an interesting tutorial, I might add. Next week, we're going to be doing flying geese, and that will conclude our building block basics, so to speak. But we always ask a question. So last week's question was quarter square triangles, yay or nay? And of course, the winner for the $10 Colourwerx gift card, randomly selected, by the way, everybody goes in the random thingamajizer, is... Wow, Suzanne, congratulations. I will get your $10 Colourwerx gift card to you via email, because I believe I do have your email, so you should be expecting that sometime this afternoon in your email, and it's good. It doesn't have an expiration date. You just use the coupon code when you want to come shopping with us. Speaking of shopping, I just want to flash these right there. We have these beautiful Island Boutique basics in the shop right now in fat quarter bundles, or in beautiful half yard stacks here, and you've got every color of the rainbow. There's 10 in each bundle. So a beautiful color wheel of boutique solids for you from our friends at Island Boutiques. These are not modeled batiks. You see there's no modeling. They're actually solid, but they are hand dyed. So they are beautiful in half yard or fat quarter bundles for you in the Colourwerx shop. So with that, let's see. Let's see who's checking in. Nedra. Oh, no, Susan. Hi, Susan from Georgia. Nice to see you.
Nedra's there.
And hi, Nedra. How are you today? Nedra's from Arizona. All of our
Sandra
friends
from
in
Missouri.
Arizona. And Sandra from Missouri. Woo! Who's getting snow, by the way?
Oh, here we go.
What? Anna from...
He's back in the saddle.
Oh, yes. What? Oh, back in the saddle. What? Are you okay, Anna? What? Are you riding horses? What?
And Lena's working on the funky
Lena
cat.
is working on funky cats today. Yes, the mod cats. I saw that. Well, and Julie's checking in from Oceanside. Hello, Julie. Nice to have you guys here. You guys are also great with the comments. We love it, talking to all of you and checking in here. Make sure you like and share this video. Let's go right... what, Carl? Carl's got his finger up. He puts his finger up like this to me, and I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
Now read the comment.
I can't read.
Oh.
Wow, thanks, Susan. Well, congratulations, Suzanne, for being today's winner for the $10 Colourwerx gift card. It is our pleasure, and each week we do that, so stay tuned for the end of this show. We're going to be doing another question for you guys to do another $10 Colourwerx gift card next week. Let's head over, because it's kind of a long tutorial today, so let's head over to the overhead and talk about square in a square. Okay, hopefully everything's working over here. So square in a square, there's a bunch of different techniques in the way of doing a square in a square. And of course, a square in a square looks like a square within another square. And so this method right here that I'm going to show you first is the easiest probably method to do, but it's also, you have to be fairly accurate. It doesn't allow you a lot of wiggle room to be inaccurate. It doesn't allow you any trimming down room per se, unless you are dead on accurate. And the way this particular square in a square is made, and like I said, I'm gonna go through a couple different methods for you, is this is what I call the square in the corner method. So you can see I've got a whole square, and you sew across a diagonal line, and then you flip it out, and that makes your square in a square. So let's talk about how this one is made. So the first thing you have to decide when you do square in a square on this method with the square in the corner method is you decide what you want your block to finish at. So if this particular block would be a 4-inch finish. Right now this block measures 4.5 inches because of course unfinished sizes are a 1/2 inch larger than finished sizes. So the first thing you decide is how large do I want my square in a square to finish? And I wanted this square in a square to finish at 4. So what do? I cut this center block that's going to appear in the center, the size, the unfinished size. So you can see I've got a 4.5 inch square here, which will be the center of this block. And I want this block to finish at 4. So I've cut it at 4.5. So now I need to decide, well, what size do these squares have to be cut at? Well, I need to take my finished size, a little bit of math now, getting everybody's brains working here on Friday. So my finished size is 4. I divide that by 2. So that would be 2, and I have to add my 1/4 inch seam allowance on all 4 sides, or 1/2 inch, basically, to that measurement. So these squares have to be cut at 2.5 inches. Does that make sense? So if I was going to have my square in a square in this method finish at 6, I would cut this square at 6.5. I would divide my finished size by 2, which would be 6 divided by 2 is 3, and I would cut my squares that go in the corners at 3.5. Does that make sense? Okay, let me know if I'm making sense. The first step is, once I have 4 2.5 inch squares finished, because remember I'm finishing this at 4, is I stick 2 squares in opposite corners. And you can see I've drawn a diagonal line across here. And I'm going to sew right on that line. Now this is where it has to be accurate for this to work. So I'm going to sew right on the line here, or right above the line. So when I do this method, and let me flip this out for this. So there it is sewn. I actually sew a hair above the line. And why do I do that? And you can barely see it on camera, but it's a hair above the line, like a thread above the line and a thread below the line on this one. Because when I flip this tip out to meet the corner, my thread is taking up space here. And so I need to make sure that when I flip this tip out, I want this tip right here to meet that edge of that square below it. if I sew directly on the line or I'm not accurate, when I flip this tip out, more than likely what's going to happen is it's not going to meet. It's going to be just shy. I don't know if you can see that, just shy of meeting the corner if I don't sew just above the line. So that is a little tip there when you do any kind of this square in the corner kind of technique, and you have to sew on the line. So just above the line so that you can force the tip when you press it to meet the line. And so since I don't have an iron with me, I'm just going to glue a little bit here to get these guys to lay down. So I would press these out, and now I have what is technically a snowball block, if you can see that. That's a snowball block, but I want to do a square and a square. So I take my remaining two 2.5-inch squares, I stick them in the corner like that, and yes, they do overlap the other squares at the edges. When I sew across these lines, and again, I'm sewing a hair below or a hair above the line, and I flip those out, I get this. Okay, and then I would go back once I'm assured that I have everybody correct and the correct size. There's no wiggle room here, so I can't take my square ruler. I can kind of trim it down, but I don't have a lot of wiggle room to trim down. And what I would do is come back and I would actually take away this extra fabric below here. So I would, once it's pressed, I would cut away the extra fabric at each corner and give it a good pressing and make sure that it's measuring still 4.5 by 4.5. So whatever square you start with at the beginning, remember I started with a 4.5-inch purple square, that's what your square will end up being. It doesn't grow larger, it doesn't grow smaller. If it does, you have a problem. So that is the first technique for square and a square, which is called, square. I call it the square in the corner technique. And like I said, this will work for whatever size you're doing. So if you're doing, 6.5, you would 6-inch finished, you would cut your center square at 6.5. You would divide it by 2, and you get 3. So you cut your corner squares at 3.5. That works perfectly. Let's look at another technique that gives you a little bit more wiggle room. So this technique is, let's say I want my square and a square to finish at 6. So I'm going to take away 1.25 inches from my finished size, and I'm going to cut 3 squares. So I want my finished size to be 6. So I'm going to cut 3 squares. These are the outsides. This is the center, the square in the square. This would be the center, square in a square. I'm going to cut these at 4.75. That's 1.25 inches less than my finished size. And I have, for the camera, actually drawn these very dark horizontal and vertical lines. So the first step, actually, I wouldn't draw those. I would actually just fold this in half, give it a press, fold it in half again the other way, give it a press to create creases that go vertically and horizontally across my square. For the purpose of today, I've drawn those in so you can see them for the camera. The next thing I would do is take my 2 squares here that I've cut at the exact same size, and I would cut them in half diagonally so that I can create 4 triangles. So I'm just going to do that right now with this one here. So I've got 2 triangles, and I'm going to cut this guy in half, and now I've got 2 triangles there. Then I would take these triangles and I would take them over to the pressing board and press them in half to create a crease line that goes down the center of each triangle. I've drawn it on this one with like a white pen. I don't know if you can see that. And the way this starts to go together is I need to put one triangle on one side, and I'm going to line up the crease marks of the triangle and the square below at center and make sure the point of my triangle is headed out along the crease center, dead center of that crease line going on the other side. And then I would just sew across there. And then once that was attached, let's say it's attached, I would do the opposite side like that and sew across there. And again, the point has to be lined up with the crease line there. And so what does that look like? It looks like this. So, and you can see I've actually pressed outward at this point. Now I have to add my other 2 sides to make the square in a square. So again, I take those remaining 2 triangles, and you can see they're overlapping here at the edges. That's important because that's what gives you down your trimming room. And I would sew across there, and it would do that. I would flip it out, and I would sew across here, again lining up the crease lines, and for purposes of the camera, these are all drawn in, and sew across there. And so what does that give me? It has something that looks like that. And you can see that this particular method, and we'll talk about sizes in a minute, gives you a lot of room to trim down. So if you're feeling particularly sloppy on one day, you don't feel like you're being accurate, this is a great method to do this with, okay? And what I've got is my 6.5-inch Creative Grid square ruler. What I like about Creative Grid's rulers, I'm not an influencer, by the way, or an ambassador. I just like these rulers. Is they have this nice white line that goes down the center of their rulers that marks the center of this 6.5-inch ruler. Now, I mean, I can do math too. So if I want my unfinished square, I should say, to end up at 6.5, well, I have to divide what half of 6.5 is. And half of 6.5 is 3.25, and that's where these white lines are. So I'm going to plop my square ruler down here, and I'm going to use these white lines as like crosshairs to put my square and a square dead center. And what I'm doing, I don't know if you can see it, is I'm actually, the crosshair of the center white line that runs horizontally is running right across through dead center of my points of my square and a square. And the same thing here vertically. And before I square this down, I'm going to make sure I've got 1/4 inch of dark purple on either side or on the outer sides of each point. So I have 1/4 inch of dark purple here, I have 1/4 inch of dark purple up there, 1/4 inch there, and 1/4 inch there. And once I know that I'm in dead center by these crosshairs on my ruler, I can go ahead and look how much I can take off and how sloppy I can be when I want to be before squaring down. I prefer this method because I don't have to be entirely accurate. And I like that sometimes because I'm not always accurate. And that gives me my perfect square and a square at a 6-inch finish size. This measures 6.5. I'll come back to this in a minute. Let's look at a different variation. What if I want to make something that looks like this? Ooh, what is that going on? I mean, that is kind of fun. Well, this is super simple too. Again, this finishes at 6, so it's 6.5 inches unfinished. And how do I do this? Again, for the center square, remember, it's 6 inches finished. I'm going to take away a inch and a quarter. So my center square, which is this beautiful cave purple, is going to be cut at 4 3/4 inches. There's my center square. Now I'm going to go back to the tutorial from 2 weeks ago where we made half square triangles. And I'm going to make some half square triangles. So these were cut at about 5 inches, 5-inch squares. And 2 squares in yield 2 half square triangles out. So every 2 squares in gives you 2 half square triangles out. And all I'm going to do now is cut these in half diagonally. So what does that mean? I'm going to take this, I'm going to cut right in half. I've got 2 triangles with one of each fabric in each triangle. Cut that in half diagonally. And then I just do the same method that I showed you. So I would crease this over at the iron in half, crease again like this, and then I would start to put these around the square. Sewing, like I showed you before, where you line up the center crease lines. And this is a really fun way too of using a whole bunch of different fabrics. So if you can imagine, I could have not just 2 fabrics in my half square triangles that go around here. I could have a different fabric in each one of these to create like a rainbow effect. Again, I would sew these all together, and I would, again, take my square ruler and square this down, making sure that I leave the 1/4 inch seam allowance at each tip. That's very important so you don't cut off your tips. Okay, pretty exciting, right? Let's go back to this block here. So Carl and I spent how much time last night, Carl? 3 hours trying to find a formula that worked for no matter what size you were making square and a square. Because remember, I said this one finishes at 6. It's unfinished at 6.5. And in order to start with squares, I cut all of my squares at 4 3/4, which was 1 1/4 inches less than my finished size. So we were trying to figure out, well, what if I wanted to take, oh, I don't know, I had this Gasly's fabric. Everybody knows the Gasly's. It's a wonderful little fabric line from Alexander Henry with these strange little characters. And I thought, what if I want to fussy cut one of these characters, and I want my square to finish at 9 inches? Well, we went back and we tried this method. So if it was 9 inches finished, I would cut my Gasly fabric, my square in the square, the one in the center, at 7 3/4. Well, it didn't work. And we tried it and we tried it and we tried it. And finally, after mucho frustration, and I almost canceled the tutorial because I thought, well, this is not going to work, you guys, Carl came up with this brilliant idea. So let's talk about this. What if you want to do this? You've got this beautiful Gasly's fabric or something that you want, an I Spy quilt, and you want to come up with whatever size you want to come up with for a square and a square. Guess what Carl grabbed out of the closet? Yep, graph paper. Woo! This is the answer to all your problems. Okay, let's talk about making a square and a square 9-inch finished block using this particular fabric, fussy cut in the middle. And I don't want to sit and do math. I don't want to do what I did last night, which is I went over and did block upon block, wasted a lot of fabric. I grabbed, or Carl did, the graph paper, and I want to show you how we figured out what each of these units should be cut at very quickly. And you can do this too with no matter what size square and a square you want to create. So again, using my example of the Alexander Henry fabric, and I'm going to use a Sharpie. So this is for the camera only, because notice on the original one, Carl used a thin, fine ink. You want to use a pencil or a fine line because it, again, like thread, thicker markers add more bulk or more to the measurement, and it's less accurate. But for today, I'm going to use a Sharpie. So again, going back to my Alexander Henry fabric here, I want to make a 9-inch finished square and a square using the method I just showed you. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use this graph paper, which is 1/4 inch increments. Each square is a 1/4 inch. And I'm going to draw my finished square, which is 9 inches by 9 inches. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Okay, so let me just do that. Right. That's what my finished block is going to be, 9 inches by 9 inches. Now, because the square and a square is on point, meaning the middle of the square is on point, I've got to figure out what these midpoints are. So again, 9 inches finished. So I need to figure out what half of 9 inches is. Well, what is half of 9 inches? It's 4 1/4. So I'm going to take my square ruler again.
4 1/2.
4 1/2, sorry, 4 1/2. And I'm going to just make a little mark at the 4 1/2 mark here. And I'm going to do the same on this side. So I'm just looking over at 4 1/2. You can use the graphs too if you want. Now I'm going to connect each one of these points that I just made. And again, remember, you can do this for any size square and a square you want to make. So if you want your square and a square to finish at 12 inches, and you don't want to figure out the math for that, just go get yourself graph paper and do exactly these steps. All right, there's my middle fussy cut square. These are finished now sizes. So this is a 9-inch finished square. This is the finished point or on point middle, which would be the Alexander fussy cut fabric. So now I've got to add my 1/4 inch seam allowance, of course, to know what size this middle square should be cut at. So it's just basic math. I'm just going to add my 1/4 inch seam allowance in, I'm going to use, let me use some pink here. I'll use this pink. So I'm adding a 1/4 inch to my blue line. Okay. And you guys let us know. Carl's monitoring the comments in case you have any questions. All right, there is what I need to cut. Now, if I were to measure the pink line, that's going to tell me exactly what I need to cut the center of my square in a square. So let's do that. If I take my ruler, and remember, this is exact now. I'm going to slap it on there. Now, it's not, it's not, let me get a whole number there. It's not 7 inches, by the way. It's actually 6 7/8. If I was dead on accurate, it's 6 7/8. That's what I need to cut my center square in a square. So here it is, 6 7/8. And I want to add a little bit of warning. So when you're doing a square and square and you're fussy cutting something, remember that the square and a square, your fussy cut, if you're trying to do like an I Spy quilt or center something fussy cut up, you want to make sure that they're on point. And what I mean by that is if I had cut these guys straight, when they got put into their square and a square, they would be tilted. So give yourself a little reminder. Sometimes I do things like this. I'm not a great artist, but sometimes I'll say, okay, I want to cut these two guys out, and I need to remind myself that I need to cut them like this. So this is a little stick figure. To remind myself, beautiful artwork, isn't it, this morning? To remind myself that I need to put them on point when I cut them. So now I have my square cut. This is 6 7/8, and I know it's 6 7/8 for sure because I have measured perfectly that square, which is the pink square. Now I've got to figure out what these setting triangles are, or the corners are. Same technique. I just go here. I'm going to add a 1/4 inch. And remember, this is not dead on accurate for what you're seeing here because I'm using a very thick Sharpie to show you what's going on. And I'm going to use green. So again, I'm going to add a 1/4 inch to my finished size. Right? There it is in green. And I need to add a 1/4 inch though down here because when I put my square and a square there, the triangle has to sew to this edge and to this edge. So I've got to add a 1/4 inch there. So all I do is add a 1/4 inch to the below the blue line on this side. And if I measure, so there you go, that's my square cut in half diagonally, which gives me 2 triangles. And if I measure that on the straight edge, which would be the side of the square, right, I get 5 1/2. And just to test it, here's a 5 1/2 inch square, right? And if I cut that in half diagonally before I cut any fabric and stick it up there, well, look at that. That works perfectly with my 6 7/8. This is for finished 9 inches. And you can do this for any size whatsoever. So if I go back to Carl's original drawing that he did late last night, which is with a fine line where we got our measurements from, you can see I had to cut my fussy cut square for the middle at 6 7/8. I know that because I have drawn my 9 inch finished block. I have drawn point to point in pink what the center square would be, and I've had to add my 1/4 inch on all sides, which is how I got to 6 7/8. And remember, that has to be accurate. The triangles can be more sloppy, but I measured out, gave a 1/4 inch beyond the finished 9 inch size here of the block, and I knew that had to be 5 1/2. So when I cut my 5 1/2 inch squares in half diagonally, I get these here, and they go on all 4 sides, right? Everybody with me so far? And what do I get? I get a nice finished block like this that's ready for squaring down that allows me to be rather not accurate with my 1/4 inch seam, which is what I like, and gives me some stuff to square down so I get perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance on all edges, because there's nothing worse than when these are not, when this is like less than a 1/4 inch on the tips and you're fighting it. So again, I have my Creative Grids ruler, 9 1/2 inch size. Again, it's got crosshairs for me in white going down dead center and across the other way. I slap it on here. I'm going to line up my crosshairs to the points. And I don't know if you guys can see that, but this white line is running across through the middle of the points right here. And when I cut this, I'm going to make sure I've got a quarter inch, quarter inch, quarter inch, quarter inch. I do. Whoosh. You have to make that noise, by the way, you guys. Whoosh. Right? Turn it around. Make it 9.5 inches because we're finishing, of course, at 9. So we need that ½ inch on the whole side. And there is my perfect square in a square, fussy cut with my Alexander Henry fabric, and I didn't have to do a lot of tests with different sizes. And believe me, you guys, when you go look at square in a square, there's 3 different methods. There's this method, which is the square in the corner. There's a paper piecing method, which a lot of people don't like paper piecing to do this. And then there's this odd measurement thing that goes on. But the problem with the odd measurement thing is it's a graph, and it doesn't always work for whatever size you're making. What does work for whatever size you're making is to simply take the tried and true graph paper that is 1/4 inch squares and draw out exactly the size you're making and what you see here so that you can be accurate with whatever you're trying to make. So that is the square in a square tutorial for today, thanks to Carl coming up with, of course, graph paper.
Well, I needed my dinner last night.
Yes.
You were up here too long.
So, and then before we go back, I want to show you. So the all stacked up quilt along. There's my bad segue again. But I wanted to show you some of my blocks. I'm using Favorite Things by Sassafras Lane. This is coming out to quilt shops, I believe, this month or next month. And I love the way these are coming out. So if you want to join the All Stacked Up Quilt Along, go over to the Colourwerx Quilt Along Facebook page. And you can see what everybody else is doing. They're doing beautiful, beautiful work. But I wanted to show you guys some of this. I just think this is the cutest little fabric. It's got little kayaking boats in it, cups of coffee, record playing or records, little flowers. It's just a cute, very bright, colorful fabric line from Sassafras Lane, coming to local quilt shops, of course, in February. So go forth with square in a square. Let's look at the all stacked up placard. There, we have 1 more week left in the quilt along, which is next week, where we'll be putting all of our quilts together. And go ahead and let me know any questions you might have. Carl is here on board as well to answer questions, since he was the one that came up with the graph paper idea. And of course, if you aren't familiar with some of Carl's other really neat tutorials, you might, I can't remember what episode it is, but he actually uses, much more than I do, construction paper to make blocks. When he's testing out a quilt block and he's not sure, he cuts the whole thing out of construction paper and actually sews it together. And so he is, and that comes from his art direction and whatever your architectural degree that you got in London and all that stuff. So if there's any questions, let's see. We have comments on that. Let's hear. Oh, Kay says brilliant. Thank you, Kay. I don't know how, it wasn't that brilliant, but I had a good time with the fussy cutting of the Alexander Henry fabric. It's always great. And Lena says, love that. Great. Nedra, that's a really fun tutorial. Thank you, Nedra. Technique. Oh, it's technique. And Lynn says, excellent tutorial. Well, why, thank you. You guys are very nice. Great tutorial, says Pat. Well, that is good. Well, I must say graph paper will save you. So graph paper is a great way of just planning out quilt blocks, designing new quilt blocks, just getting your thoughts together. And again, if you just remember, if you get the one where every square is 1/4 inch, you can do full size like I just did, full size drawing out for a block that's 10 inches finished or whatever. It always helps.
Now Sandra had a comment.
Yes,
right
Sandra.
Here.
Great info. What?
Great info, but I just can't remember. Laugh out loud. However, Benita responded with glad I can look back at these tutorials at any time.
That's right. See, so you don't have to remember. You can replay this tutorial, I might add. So this is for Sandra. You can replay this tutorial with your graph paper in hand and stop and start it and do exactly what I showed you to do on the tutorial. So again, just remember that whatever your finished size is, you're going to have to add a 1/2 inch to that because we need that 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. So again, if you're finishing at 9, it's got to be 9.5. And you start with your 9-inch finished and then add your 1/4 inch to all sides and then just start working yourself out at that point. And that works with any block that you're doing. So it's just that square and a square gets very confusing when there is no tried and true formula. And that's what I'm going to tell you. Unless you're doing the blocks in the corner, which is you have to be dead on accurate, or unless you're paper piecing. But if you want to create something out of a fussy cut piece of fabric, you're going to have to work it out on graph paper beforehand to get the actual sizes that you need. So you're not having to do what we did last night, which was, honestly, we wasted, I don't know how much fabric.
And here's Kay adding to the commentary too.
Kay,
archive the graph paper.
Archive.
Put it, save it.
Oh yes, well of course you want to save your drawing so you can go back to it. But square and a square is a wonderful technique also for fussy cutting and highlighting. So if you're doing baby quilts or a quilt that you like that with the Gasly's fabric and you really want to fussy cut a motif out, it's a great way of kind of highlighting that motif. So it's a wonderful, wonderful block. But again, there is no tried and true formula like there is with 1/2 square triangles or 1/4 square triangles for all sizes. There are graphs out there that give you what to cut each size, but I tried some of them last night and not all of them worked. So really the only one that works is the graph paper to work it out yourself. What's Lisa saying?
Well, she was saying it was a timely.
How timely, she says. Tutorial. Oh, okay. Well, you can share this, Lisa, with your group. Please share this little tutorial of Carl's about graph paper with your group because unless you're paper piecing or, like I said, doing the square in the corner, there are formulas or graphs out there. I came across a bunch of blogs with graphs and, if you're going to make it this size, you cut this size. But I was not satisfied, quite frankly, with those formulas that I found, or those graphs.
Look, I got some comments too.
Oh, Benita, you rock, Carl.
Yes,
he does. He rocks. Okay.
And Kay's added one more to it.
Wow, that's cool that Carl actually sews, yes, with construction paper. It is. I believe it's one of our early tutorials, but all of these tutorials are up on our Colourwerx YouTube page, I might add. They're also, I don't think you want to go through all the posts on Facebook, so probably the easier place to go find the construction paper tutorial is up on the Colourwerx YouTube channel, and just look through the Fab Friday section for the one that says, using construction paper to test your block.
It's cheaper than fabric.
It's much cheaper than fabric. And you can use your colors. You can use it to test your colors too, which is the other great thing. And you can mess up all day long.
And not feel guilty.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, you guys, with that, you guys have been so nice to indulge us today. Next week, we're going to be back with flying geese. That's the end of our building block basics kind of series. So if you have any more questions, I'll answer them after the show. Like I always do. I want to wish everybody a happy Colouricious weekend. Make sure if you want to jump into the All Stacked Up Quilt Along, just go over and join the Colourwerx Quilt Along page. We're having a great time. And I'm going to get ready to announce the next Quilt Along in probably in a week or so. Make sure you like and share this video with all your friends and all your quilting groups.
Whoa, we have a question of the week.
What? Oh, that's right. I forgot. What is the question of the week for the $10 Colourwerx gift card? It is, what will you put in your square and a square? Will you fussy cut something? Will you put a flower? You can also, if you're an embroiderer, you can actually fussy cut or frame your embroidery this way too. So it's a fun tutorial square to do. And I see Kay says something about Richard. What happened with Richard? I miss seeing Richard Simmons this week. Yes, for those of you tuning in, Richard Simmons' Chia Pet has moved to the trash can. He didn't do well at all. I don't even think we have that picture anymore. He was growing quite a mullet with his Chia Pet seeds and nothing else. The whole top was bald. The chest hair fell off. It was horrible. Yes, fussy cut for an I Spy, says Mary. I see that comment. That's what I meant. Yes, an I Spy quilt for kids. Beautiful. Okay. So we are out of here for the weekend. We wish you a happy Colourwerx this weekend. Happy end of January, everybody. And next week, we're going to see you February 5th, same time, for Flying Geese, which is the end of our building block basics tutorial. See you next week, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and we'll see you then. Bye.